Welcome to Deep Thoughts, a podcast designed to take you on an introspective journey into the mindsets and strategies that fuel personal growth. In every episode, we'll explore the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and real-world tactics, guiding you through powerful methods to elevate your health, wealth, relationships, and overall well-being. From deep dives into transformative habits and mindsets to candid discussions about the challenges we face in today's fast-paced world, Deep Thoughts is here to remind you of the untapped potential that lies within. If you're ready to disconnect from the distractions and connect with the tools and insights needed to create lasting change, this show is your sanctuary for self-discovery and empowerment. Tune in, reflect, and take action towards a more vibrant and fulfilling life.
Okay, so you're scrolling along, just, checking the headlines, and then suddenly, like an hour has gone by. You've been sucked into this, vortex of every crisis, every outrage, every single bad news story. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all been there. It's that feeling of just being bombarded with negativity online, especially in the news. And a lot of us, we want to understand this, what we call doomscrolling, and maybe how to get a grip on it a little bit.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to dig into on this one. We've got research articles, psychological studies. There's even a Wikipedia entry on doomscrolling.
Wow, okay.
So clearly this is something that has captured people's attention, and it makes sense why.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get lost in the weeds here, maybe we should start with just the basics. What exactly is doomscrolling?
Yeah, so Merriam-Webster, they define it as the act of spending an excessive amount of time reading, watching, or listening to negative news.
Okay, so it's not just about catching up on current events. It's more about that feeling of being kind of glued to the screen, even when you know the news is kind of getting you down.
Right, and that's where that word compulsive comes in, and Wikipedia really highlights that. It's that feeling of almost being hooked on it. You can't tear yourself away, even though you know it's probably not good for you.
So this isn't just some 21st century problem, is it? I mean, I feel like people, even way back in the day, used to complain about too much bad news, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's so interesting you say that because actually back in the 1970s, researchers were already looking into something called mean world syndrome. And this theory basically said that if you consume a lot of violent media, even fictional stuff, it can actually make you think the world is more dangerous than it really is.
So even back then, there was this idea that what we watch and what we read could actually warp how we see the world around us.
Exactly. And it really highlights this fascinating thing about our brains, We have this thing called a negativity bias, which basically means our brains are just naturally drawn to pay more attention to threats. And if you think about it, from way back in the day, evolutionarily, if you were a caveman, you were more likely to survive if you were really good at spotting danger, like a saber-toothed tiger hiding in the bushes.
Right, yeah.
So that's hardwired into us.
Oh, so you're saying our brains are still basically hardwired to fixate on the negative, even if it's just a scary headline instead of an actual saber-toothed tiger?
Pretty much, yeah. But the thing is, our world now is just flooded with information, and a lot of it is negative. And our poor ancient brains, they just haven't quite caught up to this constant barrage of news, especially when it's delivered in those really quick, attention-grabbing headlines that we see all the time.
Right. And it's not even just the amount of information, right? It's how it's delivered. It's we're constantly being pinged and buzzed with notifications and alerts and updates, on social media especially.
Yeah, you're right. You've hit on such a crucial point there. The way these platforms are designed, it actually kind of makes our negativity bias even worse.
It's we're designed to pay attention to all the scary stuff, and now we just live in a world where it's constantly shouting danger, danger 24/7.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And we haven't even gotten into the algorithms yet, right? These platforms, they're designed to keep us scrolling, right? And they do that by showing us more of what we're already clicking on. So if you're, if you are the kind of person who is drawn to those negative headlines, guess what? You're going to see a lot more of them.
It's a vicious cycle then, right? So you feel anxious, so you doom scroll,
right,
and the algorithm just gives you more stuff to be anxious about, and on it goes.
Exactly, yeah. And then you bring in another kind of layer of, human psychology on top of that, which is FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. People feel like they have to stay informed all the time, even if the information is really heavy or upsetting, because they think, well, if I know what's going on, then maybe I can control it, especially in these, uncertain times.
And so it's we're doom scrolling because we actually want to feel more in control, but then it ends up kind of having the opposite effect, right?
Yeah.
And we just feel even more helpless.
It's pretty ironic when you think about it. And, think about how fast news travels these days, especially on something like Twitter, which is one of the studies that you shared, that was really interesting, that they highlighted Twitter specifically.
Yeah, and it's all about, real-time updates. You can watch things sort of unfold as they're happening, which can really make you feel like you're right there in the middle of it, even if it's like, on the other side of the world.
Exactly. It's that constant feeling of being plugged in. You're just like bombarded with all these alerts and breaking news updates constantly. And then Twitter specifically, those tweets are so short, you end up consuming so much information so quickly that you don't even really have time to process it.
So we've got we've got our brains that are designed to glom onto the negative.
Yeah.
And then we've got this fear of missing out. And then on top of that, we have platforms, especially like Twitter, that are basically designed to keep us hooked into this constant stream of information, a lot of which is negative. I mean, is anyone safe from this whole doom and gloom spiral?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it kind of goes back to how we were talking about how our brains are wired differently, right? Because studies are showing that people who are high in neuroticism, so that basically means they experience negative emotions more intensely, those folks are much more susceptible to falling into a doom scrolling trap.
So if you're someone who's just kind of naturally prone to worry or anxiety, you might be more likely to get sucked into that negative news vortex.
Exactly, yeah. And for those folks, when they see those negative headlines, it can really play into this whole confirmation bias thing. See, I was right to be worried. The world is a scary place.
And in all of this, constantly feeding our minds this negativity, I mean, it can't be good for us, right? For our mental health.
No, unfortunately not. I mean, the research is really clear on that. Doom scrolling is linked to higher anxiety, stress, even symptoms of depression. And, if you're already struggling with, mental health challenges, all of that doom scrolling is just going to make it worse, unfortunately.
It's like we're just feeding our minds a constant diet of junk food. And then we wonder why we feel so crummy all the time.
Totally. And it's even more concerning. Some people, especially younger folks, they're dealing with all of this information overload by just completely checking out. They're just avoiding the news altogether. And that's a whole other can of worms, right? This whole news avoidance trend, because it's, it can have some real consequences for society as a whole.
You mean it's like you're just so overwhelmed that you just have to tune it all out? I get that. But yeah, I can see how that could be, a problem in the bigger picture.
Exactly. There was this one Oxford study, and they found that when people are avoiding the news, it leads to a less informed public, obviously, and that then affects, people's willingness to be, civically engaged, being involved in their communities. Even it can undermine democratic processes because people aren't informed. And we need people to be informed and engaged if we want to fix all these problems that are making everyone so anxious in the first place.
Yeah, it's not just our own mental health. It's our ability to even function as a society is kind of at stake here.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's this weird catch-22. We need to be informed to be able to, make a difference. But then this constant barrage of negativity makes it really hard to, want to engage.
Totally. It's like trying to walk this tightrope between, staying informed but not getting totally overwhelmed. But, I mean, there's got to be a way to find some kind of balance, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's actually a lot we can do to kind of break free from that doom scrolling cycle and have a healthier relationship with the news. And, it starts with just being aware, right? Just notice when you're falling down that rabbit hole of negativity. Are you actually taking in the information, or are you just scrolling mindlessly at that point?
Oh my gosh, I am so guilty of that. Just scrolling and not even really, paying attention.
We all do it. But the trick is to once you catch yourself doing that, just make that conscious decision to step away for a minute. And this might sound silly, but set boundaries for yourself. Literally decide, okay, this is how much time I'm going to spend, looking at the news today, and then stick to it. You could even set a timer on your phone to keep yourself in check.
That's a great idea. Almost like a screen time budget for news.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to really curate those social media feeds. If there are accounts or outlets that you follow that they consistently make you feel more anxious, just unfollow them. You're in control of what you're consuming,
Yeah. So it's about being more mindful of how we're consuming the news, but what about we were talking about our negativity bias earlier, right? How do we actually, rewire our brains to kind of focus more on the positive.
Well, just like you can train your body to like crave healthy foods, you can actually train your brain to kind of like crave, more positive information, right? And it's really just about making that effort to seek out the good stuff. Read like inspiring stories, watch documentaries that are uplifting, listen to like happy music, whatever works for you,
Yeah. Like we need to create a more balanced media diet.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think sometimes we forget about like the power of just gratitude, like taking a few minutes every day to just, think about what you're grateful for can make a huge difference. If you're shifting your focus away from all the things that you're afraid of and more towards the things that you appreciate in your life, it can really help kind of rewire those thought patterns.
That's awesome. So we've got all these practical things that we can do.
Yeah.
Being more mindful, setting those boundaries, actively looking for that positive content. But it really all kind of comes down to like taking control, right, of our relationship with information.
Absolutely. And, that kind of brings us to a final thought-provoking question here. If you can learn to be more choosy, about the news that you consume, what other areas of your life could benefit from you thinking more critically like that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, think about it. From the books we read to even the people that we spend time with, we are constantly being influenced. Learning how to really filter all of that information effectively is like a superpower, and not just with the news.
That's right. It's really about being more proactive and shaping your own, information landscape. And that's both online and offline.
So true. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up our deep dive on doom scrolling. We hope that you found this, exploration insightful, useful, maybe even a little empowering because, at the end of the day, you have the power to choose how you engage with the world around you. To find that balance, create a more fulfilling information diet, and, most importantly, break free from that negativity cycle. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.